Hi everybody, I'm Richard Burton. You probably saw from the title slide, I'm a manager with the Health and Safety Training Administration and Certification Unit. My area functionally covers working at heights training administration, Joint Health and Safety Committee certification training, and then from speaking with SOSE, it sounds like there's a large interest in supporting Ontario Safe Employers, which is the CPO's Health and Safety Accreditation and Recognition Program. So that's where I'm starting from, is from working at heights. So many of you know that we had just completed a transition to working for working at heights training. So we went from a set of standards that were established in 2015. New standards were established on April 1st this year, 2024. So there was a lot of activity happening to get all the training organizations that were approved to resubmit revised curriculum and other materials, so that way we could approve them. That has all been completed. We're very happy. The number of training providers covers off the full market, so if people were ever concerned about whether or not there would be sufficient training in the system upon switchover, we have plenty. So all the training providers collectively can cover the entire demand for the market in any 1 year. So we're very happy about that. I know that SOSE is one of the actual participants, or 4S offers that kind of training. So we're very happy that you were able to successfully transition, and same with Enzo with IHSA. So that's really important. Some questions that we received around working at heights was really about, well, what does it mean for the worker? So I took my training February 2024 under the old working at heights training standards. What does that mean for me on April 1st? Do I have to go back and retrain? So the answer to that is no. What happens is you're issued a record of training. It's usually good for 3 years, right? So when you go back to take a refresher course, at that point you'll pick up the new content, but the training is valid. People don't have to rush back out and get retrained 2 months after they just already received the certification. So I just want to make sure people are clear on that. On the right-hand side, it talks to some of the differences in the changes in the actual training standards. So as you can see, some ratios for classroom has changed now. So we've gone from 24 to 1 to 12 to 1 throughout the entire program. So 24 to 1 used to be just the ratio for the theory module, and 12 to 1 was always the ratio for the practical. So as an example now, the whole class can be maximum 12 learners to 1 instructor. And that is to boost quality of training at that point. Code of ethics supporting anti-racism. So you heard Dr. Moody talk about anti-racism and that kind of thing. So we've got a code of ethics now that we require all the training organizations to submit. A framework was developed, submitted, or provided to all the organizations, and they've all resubmitted with a code of ethics to maintain quality in the classroom, good behavior, safety, making it a safe environment for learning, that kind of thing. And that really is all I had to say about working at heights at this point in time. It's been a very successful program. It was evaluated by the Institute for Work and Health initially in 2019, and then there was a follow-up study about a year or so ago that shows how well it's been working. And so we're very happy about this program, and it's moving forward with some modifications and enhancements, so we're happy about that. Okay? So that covers working at heights. Right here. Beautiful. Okay. Joint Health and Safety Committee certification training. So as everybody knows, that this particular program cuts across all industry types, where you need to have based on threshold size, you need to have safety committees and then obviously members that need to be certified. The training has been around for a very long time, since the 1990s. It's gone through a couple of evolutions or adjustments over time, and we are just wrapping up a consultation that had happened about making changes to that particular training program. We're at a stage now where we have draft recommendations that we want to start moving forward with on this particular program. Just to give you a sense of sort of the dimensions of the program, 64 providers altogether that deliver GHSC training. There are 298 programs. So the way Joint Health and Safety Committee certification is is broken out. There's a part 1, which is kind of basic, part 2, which is kind of applied hazard management, and then the third part, which is really refresher training every 3 years. So as you can see, automatically you have many providers that are approved for all 3 programs, and then there are modalities of training. So we have classroom, we have distance learning, and e-learning as well, and so that's how we quickly ramp up to almost 300 programs across only 64 organizations. But again, plenty of organizations in the system to deal with demand for Joint Health and Safety Committee certification. So the goal of the review, I know that this group may have been spoken to about the JHSC consultations in the past, SOBE, but at the end of the day, we're at the point of dealing with recommendations, and the goal was to make sure that the training remained effective, relevant, and it was up to date. And so we are just awaiting final kind of sign off on recommendations, and then we'll be able to go to market with the adjustments and sort of have the minister's office identify for us when the right time would be to implement the new standards in that regard. And that covers Joint Health and Safety Committee certification training. Okay, supporting Ontario's Safe Employers program. As I mentioned, this was the Chief Prevention Officer's Occupational Safety Management System Accreditation and Employer Recognition Program. Just want to highlight some stats because it's important as it sort of provides context for this discussion today. This program came into play in 2019. We currently have 30 employers in the program that have been recognized. So we are 5 years later almost. And so the question has come up, why have we not had more employers in the program? I certainly asked the question. So what we did is last year we embarked on a program discussion to start to get some understanding around what have been the barriers to successfully getting organizations to participate in the program. What about the audit mechanisms? Are there things that can be adjusted there? So a number of questions, and we met with many stakeholders to get a lot of feedback and to try to build the awareness about this program again. It's been our belief that the program for a while, because of the pandemic, lost any kind of momentum it may have had early on. And so then it's a matter of trying to rebuild and get folks back into the program. So we're excited to see that finally we doubled the number of participants in December of 2023 to 30. We have 21 new applications that are under review. In fact, they're ready to push forward for recommendation later in the month of June. The insurance premiums to date is somewhere around $1 million for the cohort of 30 at this point. And we have 7 accredited standards for accreditation. In construction and aggregate sector and transportation, it's Core 2020. For other industries, ISO 45001, which is typically commonly used. And what came online last year in May was responsible care, which was in the chemical sector. So we have three kind of heavyweight, commonly understood and known systems that have been accredited by the CPO. And we're encouraged now by the fact that there are folks starting to apply for the program. So that is kind of where it's at. It took a lot of amendments to legislation in 2016 to enable this program to come online. So let's get into how does it work. And speaking with SOBE earlier this week, she had mentioned that there's some confusion between what is SOSE, what is Core 2020, what is ISO 45001, how do they play together and how are they different? So I think the one thing I might want to point out is that any of the systems that have been accredited, they all have audit functions attached. The ministry does not conduct any audits. We don't verify whether or not a system has been implemented beyond some very, I call surface touches, but we don't do any audits. We don't verify whether an auditor did a good job or not. There are other standards in place for that. So if you have implemented one of these systems, then we would encourage you to apply for SOSE because it's the CPO recognition that you have access to and potentially some financial incentives. So we take the good work that you've already done, and we then give that recognition out, and then you are now on the track for potential incentives through WSIB if eligible. But as well, now you get to use some recognition products from the government for having achieved that. So let's talk about the process for recognition. So kind of a quick show of hands, who has implemented an occupational safety management system at your workplace and you're using it today? Okay, quite a number of you. Okay. So we've had a few organizations that have become recognized by the Chief Prevention Officer. They have multiple systems that they've implemented. They've implemented CORE and they've implemented 45001, so, which is great. So they've achieved a couple of things, so fantastic. But when you've achieved accreditation or certification, you do that through the third-party bodies. So if you're going to achieve CORE, you go through IHSA, you get audited by a third party, and you get certified by IHSA. Same goes with ISO 45001, but you usually pick up a certification body, you work with them to get your audit done, etc. Once you have successfully implemented the occupational safety management system and it's been verified by third-party audit, submit your application to us, because now you've achieved basically what you've had to achieve to make the application. When you submit the application, it has to come in within 12 months of the date that you closed out the initial third-party audit. So as long as it comes in within 12 months, we'll take that application. And I mentioned we have some applicants or some recognized employers that use two systems. You have to make a decision around which system that you want to actually apply with to the CPO. Because when you do get recognized, we will identify the organization on our website and the system that they've been recognized to, right? So that's a choice that you would have to make. I understand there may be business advantages to having both systems on your docket, but for purpose of recognition, we can only recognize you for one. So once the application is received, it quickly gets checked to make sure all the material's there, etc. And then our assessment team does a review of the application, and we will include validation of the auditor. So we'll check the auditor, verify whether the person is actually in good standing with the audit body or the certification body to make sure that's in place. And then as long as they're in good standing, then we can say the audit is good, go through some other checks. And so some of these background checks that we have behind the scenes, the ministry is a compliance ministry. So we're going to check for things like, were there any reprisals in the last 3 years by this employer? Were there any convictions? Have they been charged under the Act? So we'll look for a bunch of other things related to compliance before we make recommendations to the Chief Prevention Officer. Okay, so those are the two differences between what we do and what people like Enzo do, et cetera, right? So they're doing the validation work, they have their system. We don't do any of that. We just take the information coming in, do some quick checks to make sure we have compliant organizations, and we move on from there. If the CPO recognizes the organization, they then get listed on our website, and then we refer those organizations over to the Workplace Safety and Insurance Board. Rod has a team set up, and they've set up a national incentive program to support folks that come through SOSE, and they will then determine whether or not an incentive is available for the organization and what the level would be. I do know SOBE had asked, how do you calculate that incentive? So I don't do the calculation. That would be Rod's team, SOBE, but I do know that it's going to be based on one criteria. Did they actually achieve SOSE recognition? And then they have other criteria that they use from an actuarial perspective to determine premium base and experience and everything else. So that's really a formula that I don't have at hand, but we can certainly work with the WSIB and trying to surface what a formula might look like if clients are looking for that kind of information. From the time that an application comes in, it's about 3 to 6 months to get approval or recognition. And I'll explain to you why. We try to set up quarterly meetings to go through recognitions with the CPO. So this group of 21 that's coming forward, we sort of set a cutoff at April 30th. Anything after April 30th will then be a group that we're going to look for in the fall, right? So this group coming through now would have been in the winter, and so coming forward to the CPO to consider for recognition. So once recognition happens, then letters go out, etc. Okay, so that's kind of that process. There we go. So I think I've mentioned some of these background checks already. So we're going to validate the audits, right? When you come in, make sure they're no older than 12 months. We want to make sure it's a lead auditor with the certification body. There are no reprisals over the last 3 years, no orders for safety committees and safety reps over the last 3 years that are outstanding. So if you get an order issued to you to establish a committee, if you comply with the order, it's no longer outstanding. So then it would not be a checkbox. But so if it's outstanding after 3 years, you've gone a long while without having a safety committee. Then there's legal issues. So looking for convictions, prosecutions that have been raised under Part 3 of the Provincial Offences Act. So Part 3 gives the authority to sort of lay charges, et cetera, and then the fines are established by the Occupational Safety Act, and the things that you're non-compliant for would be tracked through the Occupational Safety Act. And then finally, the recommendation report. So that's what we do in terms of the background checking. Now, every organization knows if you're certified, you have a 3-year cycle. So the first year you get certified by a third-party auditor, you get your certificate. Then you have 2 years where it's internal audits, and if you're 45,001, they also have the surveillance audit, which is again a third-party audit. And then on the third year, after initial certification, you have to come back through and get recertified, right? So that's kind of the cycle. So we attach to that cycle to some extent. What we require is reattestation by the organizations who've received recognition from the CPO to say that everything's the same, or here are the changes in our business. Maybe you've bought three locations and you've now brought them in under your umbrella for your certification. We want to understand that. So those kinds of things. Or the business has been sold off, or you want to change your occupational safety management system. And we've had that happen just recently, where one organization chose to move away from one system and decided to drop that and move with another system. So they had to then come back in for a recertification under the new system that they wanted to have recognition for. So it's a rare thing. Probably didn't anticipate that when we first set up the program, but it's happened. So, so then after that, in those interim years, all we require is an internal audit. So send us the internal audit report along with the annual report that we're asking, and then we're good to go. Then again, every third year, we want to see that recertification audit. Clearing the legal stuff, again, we don't want any convictions or prosecutions that are ongoing to make sure that you still qualify. If you qualify again, we then go back and notify WSIB and say, can you take a look and see if they're entitled to incentive this time around? And so that's where you'll get the incentive from. It'll be issued by WSIB. We just kind of facilitate the information about who's actually received recognition and who has continued recognition, so that way they can do their part and support all these organizations like yourselves. So I know, Sobi, you mentioned that the group may have some questions. I do have one for the group, though. It's just kind of free form, but what other information would you need from us to help you with deciding to pursue SOSE, SOSE recognition? Yes?
Question for most people here. Besides the bandwidth of actually putting the time in for the application process, what other internal bandwidth does the company need to extend in regards to get the SOSE program?
So to maintain, you mean?
Well, there's an application process.
Right.
And then you mentioned that you guys do your due diligence.
Yeah.
Anything that the company has to do outside of providing the application and the accreditation validation?
Yeah, so that would be the maintenance feature. So once you have achieved recognition, right, then you're into maintenance mode. So every year submit the, fill in an annual report. We push that out about a month before your recognition comes up to its first anniversary date. Experience has told us it takes about 2 hours to complete the annual report attestations and updates. And then you have to submit to us as well your internal audit. So you have to do an internal audit now to be certified and to maintain your certification. So we'd want that report as well, and who did the audit and all this other kind of stuff. But that's pretty much it, right? So, any other comments? Okay. Oh, hang on.
If you do have questions and you want to prepare for the, if you do have questions, there is the QR code. You can type your questions in there, and we can submit all of them to Richard, and he can answer them at his convenience. Thank you.
And just one last thing. So if you're looking at submitting for Supporting Ontario Safe Employers, the email address is at the bottom of this particular slide, SOSE@ontario.ca. Just tell us you're interested in applying for CPO recognition, and then we'll get back to you, send out a copy of the actual application form, and get the ball rolling. Okay? Thank you very much.